Thanks for allowing me to take the time to share a perspective with you. I really hope I can make it worth your while. You see, we do get it. A lot of us, and a growing number of us looking around, can't help but feel a certain anxiety at the crisis that's confronting us. We can feel it. We can sense it. There is a deep, visceral sensation of an impending storm that finds itself expressed, like or not, in most of what we now encounter. It's not really necessary for this conversation for us to discuss too much about what this crisis really is at the moment, but in fact, it is worth taking the time and quietly acknowledging that most of us really can feel it coming. It is, in fact, really pretty obvious and pretty pervasive. And the cultural interest in how it might all play out is more and more by the day being reflected in all of our choices at all levels, in the media, in our personal lives, in all of that. And it is happening whether we really want to openly admit to this reality or not. Some of us, who by nature are perhaps more curious or maybe more diligent, have probably delved a bit further into the details, and some of us might know a thing or two about the various elements of the moment that's approaching. Some of us have probably gone far enough that we have a reasonably decent grip on the systemic whole. And it's a mess. It's a very deeply, profoundly complicated place that we find ourselves in, and it can, in fact, look pretty hopeless. Still, there are a lot of commentators capitalizing on the moment who are out there offering a patchwork of potential strategies or solutions or products. But I think a lot of them aren't very satisfying. And there's a reason for that, which can be found with a little reflection, and it's that largely the solutions that are being offered up by these various experts, either those with maybe big buck institutional training or backgrounds in politics, or maybe they're engineers or economists, or maybe they're just hipsters promoting themselves. In other words, the solutions that are being passed around largely come from those with the perspective, and especially the privilege, and a set of values that had a very large hand in creating this crisis in the first place. And all too often these solutions offer other people making compromises so that personally that privilege may be preserved as long as possible. At some level, I think we all sense this, and all too often we can't help but find these strategies perhaps less compelling than we really wish or need them to be. With this set of presentations, though, I do hope to bring something different to the table. I have a perspective to share with you that I think you'll find unique and maybe hopeful, if maybe a bit difficult to stomach at first. It's not something I read about or went to school to learn. It's just a perspective that I personally have been fortunate enough to acquire, having lived a rather unique life with unusual influences. And I share it with you because I find this perspective very effective in guiding my own personal choices. It certainly empowers me with a sense of joy and purpose, even now. Things that I can tell that many of my peers feel they lack. But for the record, I'm no guru. I have been told by some people through the years that they do find some profundity in this message. And well, if they feel about it that way, I mean, that is fine. It is worth understanding, though, that in cases like this, it's always it's the other person feeling the profundity in the message that works the magic. It's not me, it's not the personality. I'm just the engendering agent. And likewise, if you find this message to offer little utility for you, well, that's your business too. Again, I'm not here to offer anything other than another way of looking at things. And I sincerely hope that we can find it to be constructive. So let's talk first about why I might look at things a little different than others might. A lot of my earliest memories as a kid involve my dad being called off to work at all hours of the day and night. These memories start as a childish irritation of play being interrupted by the pager going off, and then later on of the awareness of my dad going to work, something that I understood dads had to do even if they didn't like the idea. But over the years, as I grew up a little bit, I finally came to understand what it was that my dad did, and most importantly, that what he did was kind of unusual, and that he was doing something that really no one else wanted to do. See, my dad was the small-town undertaker. A lot of people don't understand much about what undertakers do. A lot of people think that what undertakers do is deal with the dead. And that's true, but that really is only a small part of it. What an undertaker really does is to help people deal with reality. And of course, death is a big chunk of that. There's really a lot more to being an undertaker than what people outside of the occupation understand. They think it's about basically dressing up dead people or selling caskets or headstones or something like that. Not really. I mean, the most important thing an undertaker has to do has very little to do with embalming or makeup or grave markers. That's just the practical stuff. The most important thing, the job itself, is to sit there across a desk and help a bereaved spouse or family, another human being who is in the moment of dealing with the greatest personal crisis probably of their entire life. The job is to be there and to facilitate their personal means of coping with this most difficult of moments with as much interpersonal compassion and intimacy as one can manage. And here's the tough part. You treat everyone who comes through your front door with the greatest level of respect, of support, of reverence, in spite of the fact for you, death now has become very commonplace, as commonplace perhaps as pounding nails might be for a carpenter. The job of an undertaker, you see, is to professionally offer courage and compassion in spite of an utterly stark and hopeless reality. And to do that over and over and over and over again. It is a very difficult profession, and it requires incredible personal strength and stamina. I speak from experience here. My dad very much wanted me to follow in his professional footprints, and I had my hands involved in the business very much throughout my teen years. I've been there. I get it. You get to see it all. I have to inform you. For sure, there are very few secrets that the undertaker doesn't know about. I tell you this so you can start to understand where my personal perspective has come from. Obviously, having buried perhaps a village of people myself before adulthood thrust me into a relationship with the world at an early age that very many people don't encounter until much later in life. And the repeated nature of having the lesson hammered home on a weekly basis really got through. As a result, I got a real jump start on learning the skill of facing facts. But I found it important over the years, trying to communicate this lesson, to shed some of my own personal egocentrism, and not to assume people immediately grasp what I'm talking about. Again, many people immediately assume that the lesson to be learned from a close proximity to death is about death. It's not. It's about what it means to face reality. In fact, what it means to develop a living relationship with reality. Death is just the event that is the operative mechanism that's perhaps more effective than any other to slap us to our senses. You see, reality itself is a phenomenon experienced only by the living, and one lives only as much as one has the courage to embrace it. One does, of course, have the option to reject reality, just like one has the option to reject life. And quite often, in practice, these two options are very much the same thing. Thus, the real lesson I learned from being an undertaker's kid was much more about life than death. It came from observing how people coped in that naked personal moment forced on them by a loved one's death. The lesson itself was about how an individual's degree of intimacy in their personal relationship with reality impacted their lives. And examining exactly how a relationship with reality manifests itself in people and what that means is what I'd like to discuss with you next.